Motivation. The self-serving bias is pretty much how the player feels at the end of the game. So if they win the game, then the player feel like it's all down to them. But whereas if they lost, they blame it on something around them or some other player. So this could be like a forward. If they win, they'd say it because of if they scored a goal, it's because of that goal. But if it's but then if they lost, it would be down to the defenders for not defending properly. Personality factors. Need to achieve success. This would be like a boxer facing who is not number one, having to come against the number one, and thought of them winning the title would make them more motivated because they have nothing to lose, but they have something that they can win. The need to avoid failure would be the opposite way around, so where people would try their hardest to avoid the failure, and this could be making up an injury, which would show why they made a mistake, which would show them why they didn't play at their best. They could do this so that they would prevent themselves not being the best player. Having a high need to achieve and a low need to avoid failure would mean that the athlete would be a higher achiever, as they want the best and become the best of which they can, like a boxer wanting to be number one. But an athlete with low need to achieve and a high need to avoid failure, would be an athlete who is at the top of their game and being number one in their sport at the match against lower quality players that they wouldn't want to lose and shouldn't lose, so they do whatever they can to be able to avoid the failure. Situational factors. The probability of success depends on who they are having to compete against, like if they're against the best in the world or even the worst in the world. The difficulty of the task as well, as if they were 1-0 down at half time, would make it a lot harder for them to be able to catch up and even take the lead and win the game. Having a high probability of success would be Barcelona against someone like Accrington Stanley, as Barcelona is one of the best clubs in the world, and Accrington Stanley shouldn't be able to compete against their standard. And so it should be an easy win for Barcelona. If they had a low probability of success, would be the opposite way around. So the thought of Accrington Stanley having to play against Barcelona, so it would give a negative motivation to Accrington, as they would know that they wouldn't have a chance of beating them. Incentive value of success. This would relate to how people feel when winning. So whether it was an individual sport or even a team sport, if a top player was having to play a novice, then it would give the elite athlete low satisfaction of winning because they knew it was going to be an easy game and that they should easily win it. But if they're against another elite athlete, then there'll be more satisfaction because it'll be a bit more of a challenge for them, and that they'll be more happy with themselves for winning it. A high incentive value of success would be, for an example, would be West Ham versus Oxford City. West Ham, because West Ham should win because they play at a higher standard. But for a team with a low incentive value would be the opposite way around. So if Oxford, as they know, there'll be a slim chance of beating them, even if they ever play as well as they can. Having a low incentive value of success and a high need to achieve would give the athlete a normal motivation, as they would know that they would want to win the game, but they know that they don't have a chance at however well they play. Motivational climate. These are things like the environment, and the weather as well. So if it's nice weather, you'll be more motivated to go out and play, because you know it's not cold and wet, and you'll be happier as it's a lot warmer. But the things around you would also motivate you. So like the crowd would motivate you, as it'd be a good atmosphere, and everyone else would just get you all hyped up. Physical motivation. If a club would have good facilities, then it cause you as a player, to be more involved with the club, as you know it doesn't look bad and it's got a nice place to be. If a club has good equipment, like a brand new kit, would make you look more professional than a tacky old kit, and as well as if they had new balls and enough for each player to bring more people into the sport, as you know that everyone would be able to improve, not just certain people at certain times. The weather would be another physical motivation, as in both ways depends on what it's like. Because if it's raining, it wouldn't motivate you because you'd end up getting wet and cold and possibly becoming ill. But like I said earlier, if it's good weather, you'd want to get out more often and play the sport. Social environment. This would be determined by how close you are as a team. So if a team was close, then it would be more motivated to play together, and you'd be able to trust them more during the games. As if you're not a close team, then you wouldn't be able to motivate to play with them because you wouldn't know them, you wouldn't be able to call them by their own name. This would also be determined by the intensity of the sport, as if the training sessions was at the right intensity that you liked, you'd be more motivated to go. But if it was a high intensity training session week in, week out, you wouldn't be as motivated to train, as it would be too hard for you and you just not enjoy yourself whilst at the training sessions. The learning versus competition would help to affect motivation of a player. If you join a club to learn, train and learn new skills or develop the ones you have, you'd be more there for the learning of the sport. But if you go there to play the games and win matches, then you'd be there for the competition. But if the training and games were at a low intensity, then you'd be more there to learn rather than play games and compete in competitions. Significant others. This is people like coaches and family which motivate you by telling you ways you are able to improve your skills and become a better player. But people and family, in particular parents, would help to motivate you because they tell you about their past achievements, and you'd be more motivated because you want to be just like them in the future. You can also be motivated by friends and peers, because during training, if you have to do training exercises in groups, then you'll all be able to motivate each other to help each other to improve. Leaders. The multi-dimensional model of leadership shows what a coach needs to be able to help the athletes to improve and become more motivated. Leaders need more specific qualities to be able to be motivated, to motivate others, like being friendly as well as being a professional, so they know what would be fun as well as helping them to improve. They should also have required, actual and preferred behaviours to be able to increase motivation. So the required behaviour would be a professional one, which would be able to help them teach the athletes and to improve. But then the actual behaviour would be how they normally are. So if they're friendly and funny, so the athletes will be able to trust them. But as well as preferred behaviour, which is what the athletes would want you to be like. The definition of arousal is your level of excitement and readiness to perform. Arousal can have a positive and negative effect on your performance. Coming up, I have 4 different examples of how the level of arousal can affect your sport. First off is archery. An archer can become aroused before they shoot, and this affects by things like the pressure of hitting the target. Otherwise, they wouldn't feel like a very good elite athlete, as they know that they should be hitting the targets. The media can affect your level of arousal. Like Larry Godfrey would have a lot of pressure from the media because he is in the Olympics, which was based in England, which is his home country, and that he should be making the country proud, and there'll be a lot more English people who've been cheering him on. My next one is football. In football, during a penalty shootout, the crowd would affect the player's arousal level in either a positive or even a negative way. The player taking it could be aroused to their optimum level or become over-aroused. David Beckham was a good example for a player who managed to become over-aroused, because in the 2008 UEFA European Championship, he missed a penalty. He's also a good example for the self-serving bias, as he blamed it on the penalty spot for not being flat. It also didn't help David Beckham that he was playing for his country, as it make him more aroused, as he would be wanting to do his country proud and even take him through to the final and win the tournament. My next one is basketball. In basketball, when taking a free throw, this could affect you whether you win or lose. Uh, if they got over aroused, then your performance would be dipped and would cause you to miss an easy shot. But if you got to your optimum level of performance, then you would make the shots easy and win the game for your team. The crowd would affect you just like in a lot of sports. As if you were being booed, then it would put you off, make you feel bad and lose your arousal level. So that would cause your performance to drop. In a free throw, your opponents and teammates could even cause you to be over aroused or under aroused because the other team would be wanting you to miss, so you'd be knowing that they would be there thinking about it or putting you off somehow, and your team would be cheering you on, wanting you to win. My fourth sport is rugby. When in a World Cup final, you could have the pressure of having the winning kick, so it'd be the last opportunity if you're down to either draw or even win the game for your team. You'd have your whole country watching you and wishing that you to make the shot, and it could cause you to become over aroused, so put you off and might lose it for your country as you'd be distracted by other things like people in the crowd. This graph shows how the level of arousal would affect your level of performance. So the higher the level of arousal would make your performance increase. An example of this would be a weightlifter, as you would need to be aroused to the optimal to be able to lift the weights easier, but this can always over arouse themselves, which would make them lose their technique or even forget to chalk out the hands, so it would make them struggle. But this is not a valid theory, as it would only apply to a certain amount of sports. It would only really affect sports which require little techniques, but with sports which require a lot of techniques would mean that they wouldn't be able to get aroused. This would mean that if Usain Bolt got highly aroused, then he would be able to run the 100 meters at his best and get his fastest time. But if he is low aroused, then he would not be able to remember, and he might maybe disqualified or lose out on the race. So as in one of his races, he got into he was just about to start. He got himself so aroused he forgot about what he has to do and the timing of what he's doing. The next hypothesis shows the relationship between how arousal is able to affect the performance in a curvilinear way. This shows that there is many different degrees of which people can be affected by arousal. People can get affected by the tasks that they face. If a basketball team who Tracy McGrady played for had a good game, managed to score 13 points in 33 seconds, but this player may have got over aroused at the end, or which would cause his performance to drop. So it would make him lose all of his confidence. Or if the player had a low arousal level, then it would also make them have a poor performance. This also isn't a valid theory, because if you've gone from a maximum performance to poor performance, it would be a solid slope, not slowly sloping on down, as it would go straight wrong, and it will cause your performance to drop instantly. This graph shows the different sports and how the level of arousal would affect them. So the red graph are games which require a low level of arousal and accuracy. As the sport, this would be sports like darts, shooting, and golf. This is because you need a high level of concentration and focus in their sport to get the accurate shots which they need. In the green would contain the team and invasion sports like football, basketball, and rugby. This is because they would need a moderate amount of arousal so they can get the balance of the right technique and remembering every one of their plays. This would also require a moderate amount of concentration and focus, as you would need to keep your eyes on the rest of your team as well as where the ball is. Finally, in the blue graph contains sports like boxing. This because they would need a high level of arousal to be able to get their blood pumping around the body and able to put the power behind their punches. But there isn't too much techniques to be able to remember in the sport. So this requires a low level of concentration and focus, because you would have to concentrate on your movements, but that's about it. There isn't too much. When using motor skills, it needs an average level of arousal to be used. There's two different types of skills. There's gross skills, which are a high arousal level, because it is using a large group of muscles. This sport would be like shot put, as you need to use the big muscles to be able to perform the technique. Then there are fine skills which only require a low arousal level. This would be sports like darts, which only require fine movements in the fingers and flexors. The red graph shows the complex skills, otherwise known as the fine skills. This is because it requires you to have a little arousal and a high level concentration and focus, as there's a lot more techniques for them to remember. Then the blue is the gross skills, otherwise known as the simple skills, which need a high level arousal as there is a little concentration and focus required to fulfill their techniques. The red graph shows novice athletes. They would have a low level of arousal because they need to focus and concentrate on their fine movements, because if they had a high level of arousal, then they would lose their focus and mess up on some of the simple techniques needed for their sports. The green graph shows intermediate athletes, which have a reasonable skill level, so they are able to have a medium amount of arousal, as they will still need to concentrate a little bit on their skills. Then finally, the blue graph shows elite athletes. They would be allowed to have a higher level of arousal because they would have mastered their skills required in their sport. This would even allow them to not to have would have a high level of focus as they know the skill, but also would allow them to push themselves harder and push their bodies to a new limit. This is something sports psychologists have noted, that performance doesn't always gradually decrease, but instantly decreases when the arousal level increases, which is shown back in the inverted U theory. But when commentators say that they have fallen to pieces, then completely break down, so it's an instant thing. The catastrophe theory shows a dramatic decrease in performance. On the graph there's 4 letters, A, B, C and D. A is where the cognitive anxiety and physiological arousal are high, which would lead them to have a catastrophic effect on their performance. This can be caused by them having some negative thoughts in their minds, which would put them off in the crucial moments. B shows when the athlete either continues with the extreme over-arousal, which would cause their performance to decrease even more, or find the negative thought and remove it to help it increase performance. C is where the point where your arousal level causes your performance to decline even more till you're at a real low performance level. D is where you would be when the athlete gets to grips with the issues that they're having and gets rid of them. So if it was a thought, then they would get rid of the thought. And their arousal level would then return to their optimum level, or go back round in a loop. If you're taking a penalty kick in rugby, this would be a good example of having low arousal. This would cause you to pay attention of things which are happening around you, and would make your attention span broaden, which would make you look at other things which are happening around you. So people in the crowd could put you off and make you miskick the ball or miss the penalty, as you have a low concentration level and your coordinations drop. For optimal arousal, it would be if you were playing football and the player you were marking, and if you had the optimum level or arousal, you would be able to notice what footed the player is, so you'd be able to shift the player onto his weaker foot or tackle him on his stronger foot. This would because you would have a high concentration level, and you'd be able to notice the small little details which are happening around you. If you had a high arousal level, this would cause you to have a narrow vision, and you would be hypersensitive to things which happen around you. This could be a football player again who tries to watch the other players run instead of the player you were meant to be marking. This would be because you would be hyper elevated concentration, so you'd be thinking about other things instead of the main thing that you're meant to be looking at. Stress is the process whereby an individual perceives a threat and responds with a series of physiological changes. We perceive the demands, threats, or fears outweigh the perceived capabilities or benefits. So in short terms, it is where our fears outweigh the thoughts of achieving our self-set goals. It would put you off of what you are trying to aim for. There's two types of stress. There's good stress and bad stress. The good stress is called eustress. This would give you a feeling of fulfillment, which can help you to increase your skills and focus attention to specific aspects of a sport. An example of this could be in football, when a striker manages to do a good turn or outskill a defender and manage to score a goal. This would increase his skill level because he managed to do it once, so he would try to do it again. Distress is the bad stress, and this is an extreme form of anxiety, nervousness, apprehension, and even worry. This could happen if a hockey player, you mispass the ball, it would fill you with negative thoughts, so you're less likely to try a difficult pass again, and always play a simple pass inside. There is different ways of which the body reacts to stressful scenarios. They are called two different things. One's a sympathetic response, which is the first 4 to 5 seconds when in a stressful scenario. Then the other one is the parasympathetic, which is up to 10 seconds after, and when your body is coming back to its original ways. Sympathetic response can be told when the person's pupils have been dilated, their heart rate is increased, their breathing rate is increased, and your blood is being directed to the limbs so the body can use it for a fight or flight response. Your digestion stops as the blood has been redirected away from the organs, and you'd have a slow metabolism, and it decreases saliva response. For the parasympathetic response, it's the opposite of the sympathetic response, as your pupils would constrict, your heart rate would decrease, your breathing rate would decrease, the blood goes to all your major organs, digestion resumes because it has the blood back at the organs again, it increases metabolism and saliva response. External stress is where things in the environment or surroundings which would cause you stress. This can be something like the weather and the crowd. The weather would affect you because it would worry you of how things will move in the wind. So if the ball went in the air and you're going up for a header, that you'd worry about whether it'd fly off to one direction, so you'd have to steady yourself and watch it more. The crowd could just be chanting things about you and would put you off and worry you. There's internal stress, which is things you think about, which will put you off and stress you out. This can be things like past memories and experiences, current injuries, and how we feel about our worthiness. Current injuries can stress you out because you may worry whether it occur again, or whether it would be even worse, as if you didn't rest your injury for long enough, then you'd worry that you'd come back even worse. Personal factors can help to create stress because your family and friends might have put you off by having a big argument just before the match day, so you turn up not in the right mood and unfocused. Money issues would be able to stress you out, as if you were in a debt. You would be worrying about how you'll pay for things, how you'll pay your mortgage, and worry about everything's going to get repossessed. Occupational factors can be things that relate to your job. So if you are not enjoying your job, then you would be thinking about it, and that you would have to wake up to that job and not enjoy life. Stress can be caused by things within the sport, like if you didn't have a good relationship with your teammates, then you wouldn't enjoy playing and maybe contemplate quitting the sport. The definition of anxiety is the result of an interaction between the individual and the environment, an emotional response to the demands placed upon the individual by the environment. This is a way of saying is the way of which you respond to a scenario emotionally. There are different types of anxiety. There is state, trait, somatic, and even behavioral anxiety. State anxiety is a temporary anxiety. This is because it responds to the different scenarios which you are claimed to be threatening it to you. The trait anxiety is where your mind thinks you're being threatened all of the time, even when you're not being threatened. This could be where a player starts to curse when you tackle them, but you'd think that they are saying it to you when they're actually doing it to themselves because they're annoyed. Somatic anxiety is the physiological responses to the situations. These are things like an increase of heart rate and breathing rate. You would start to sweat and your muscles would start to tense up. Then the behavioural response is how you respond to a certain level of stress. Like if you got so stressed out, you may break down into crying. This is a table which shows the different ways in which you can tell what sort of anxiety the person is feeling. The cognitive responses cover the trait and state anxiety. Anxiety can create positive and negative effects. You can be affected badly by anxiety because it would cause you to lose your concentration, your attention levels would drop. You would also have a hyper elevated muscle tension, so your muscles would tense up a lot more than usual, and you may would have a lack of coordination as you're thinking about everything bad. You can have be affected positively because it would cause your body to physiologically increase, which may lead to having better performance. So it could relate to arousal. It can increase because as your heart rate and breathing rate would increase, it would send the blood and oxygen around the body to the working muscles a lot faster than it would.